The good news for BYU is they needed to clobber TCU, and they did. The bad news is Alabama lost.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. What a day it was. And it's all part of the number one sports podcast network. Thank you all so much for helping make that possible. The Texas schools, A&M, what do we make of whatever happened in College Station? And the Texas Longhorns, are they actually out of the playoff? Michigan is not, because they found a way to win. And guess what? A couple schools that are now but weren't going into the weekend. So let's start with BYU. They just absolutely demolished TCU. Offense, defense, but this was a complete and utter smattering. And that's the good news. Because as I said on my Friday show going into the weekend, you want to impress the committee, you only get one chance to make that first post-loss impression. This is as good as it gets. You come back home, you're playing TCU, late game, 44-13, the final score. Exactly what BYU needed, because they are going to be fighting a battle of reputation, brand, resume, all that stuff. I think it's pretty clear. The committee can change its mind on a weekly basis, sure, but when they drop BYU to 12 after that loss, because you watch how far Texas drops, it won't be as far as BYU did, even though there are similarities in those games. BYU plays at Cincinnati and then hosts UCF. If they win those two games, I hope they will be in the college football playoff. I think they will. I think that they will. And that they played well in this game and did everything that they wanted to. And Bear Bachmeyer went crazy, and you held a high-octane TCU offense to 13 points and flexed the defensive muscle. And the offense was really the problem at Texas Tech more than the defense, which did what it could. The Cougars went for 151 and 3 scores on the ground, held Josh Hoover, who was my preseason number one quarterback in the Big 12. That hasn't really changed. If you put up every Big 12 quarterback and said, who do you want as your first pick, I'm probably going with Josh Hoover. He was Sam Darnold on Monday Night Football, seeing ghosts out there. 10 for 23, 183 yards, and 2 interceptions. It's the sort of game that the SEC homers would say hypothetically happens if one of their high-end teams played a team of TCU's caliber. That's what it looked like. So that's all the good news for BYU. Here's the bad news. Alabama lost. That is not good for BYU. It's bad for BYU, as a matter of fact. I think at 11-1 or 11-2, they would still get in. I am not 100% certain. I am not. I hope that I am being overly reactive. I hope that I am being too much of a nervous Nelly. I hope all of those things, for the sake of the Cougars and frankly for the sake of college football and just sanity in general. But Alabama, if they had beaten Oklahoma, who was one spot ahead of BYU, you would have had the ability to go right ahead. Oklahoma would have had to fall a little. They couldn't stay stagnant at that spot. They couldn't be ahead of you with 3 losses, right? Gosh, I hope not. Well, guess what? The committee's already got several 2-loss teams coming into today. Notre Dame, that beat Pitt and looked really good. Texas and Oklahoma at 2 losses were already ahead of BYU. So Oklahoma is going to go there and stay there unless they lose another game. And maybe if they don't lose another game. And now you have to throw Alabama into the fold. You got what you needed if you're BYU from Georgia. Georgia beating Texas, and in the manner in which they did, is exactly what you were looking for. And Alabama failing to do that against Oklahoma because they kept turning the football over against that great Oklahoma defense, that didn't do you any favors. Because in no world, if I'm a BYU fan, do I want to try and fight a resume battle regardless of record, I don't want to fight one with Alabama, because you have to remember, despite the home loss, their 17-game home winning streak came to an end. They have 2 losses. They're not very good, and they play Eastern Illinois next week, so at least they get a break before they play Auburn on the road in an Iron Bowl that I hope, for the sake of the sport, decides their playoff fate. But you got to remember, they have a win at Georgia. They beat Vanderbilt at home. They won at Missouri, who was ranked at the time. They beat Tennessee. And yeah, South Carolina and LSU had fallen off, so those wins not doing a ton. But those wins are holding a lot of weight. I think they should, because those are all good wins. But with the Oklahoma loss, that lowers the margin of error, but it also creates a world in which Alabama could get in over BYU. Now, as I have said for a long time here on the show, help is often given to those in college football who hold their own. BYU, if they hold their own, should be fine. They should be fine. But I just could not shake that thought. It was my number one reaction once BYU won. I thought about it for a moment and went, wait a minute. Alabama's going to be ranked ahead of BYU when the rankings come out on Tuesday. So does BYU need help because you're going to get the ACC champ and a group of 5 team into the playoff automatically? I've lobbied against auto bids for a long time, by the way. Just throwing it out there. But here we are. Are you going to get surpassed? Because just because you're in the top 12 of the rankings does not mean you're one of the 12 teams that gets in. We fixed the seeding system. That's good. But we've still got the auto bids for conference champions. And so as a result, that could get dicey. So speaking of Alabama, I'm going to talk more about Oklahoma tomorrow. I just wanted to jump in because of this parallel and share thoughts on the Crimson Tide. The worst of... No, I can't go that far. I can't go that far in my fan mood assessment, which is good. Good vibes for BYU after that game, kind of stabilizing force. Bad vibes for Alabama here. They still should control their own fate to make the college football playoff. Wouldn't have been that way in the 4-team era, but here we are in the 12-team playoff. This is what you all wanted, and I understand there are benefits, and you like it, and college football is still great, but this is one of the downsides. Just want to point that out, and then also get to the point that Alabama looked like what Alabama is under Kalen DeBoer when they're bad. Sloppy all over the place. Missing a field goal before the half. Lost the game by 2. Could not stop turning the football over. Could not stop committing penalties at the wrong time. All of those same issues, they had gone away for a while. Not turning the ball over, being relatively clean. They started running the ball better than they had before. All credit due to the Oklahoma defense, which got 7 points in this game. The Oklahoma offense performed the exact way I expected them to. Did you know that Oklahoma just ended Alabama's 17-game home winning streak with, get ready, are you prepared? 212 yards of total offense. 212 yards is all it took. Ty Simpson went for 326. Liked him more than John Mateer going into this game, and he threw for way more yards and was overall better. And Mateer could have easily had 3 or 4 interceptions in this game, but that was one of those other things that Alabama just didn't do. And Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners won this game with situational football, with defense, and Alabama making a bunch of mistakes. They still don't run it incredibly well. They're not going to. I'm not sitting around waiting for Alabama to suddenly become that. But one of the reasons I was confident in the Crimson Tide going into this game was that I felt like their defense had made strides and was actually playing well. And guess what? They did. The defense gave up 16 points. I had Alabama winning 31-17. So an incredibly frustrating game if you're a Crimson Tide fan. The pressure on Kalen DeBoer is immense for the Iron Bowl in 2 weeks. He gets the late season SEC cupcake on Saturday against Eastern Illinois, so they get a little bit of a break. But that Iron Bowl is going to have some serious stakes. It's not a playoff elimination loss for Bama anymore. 10-2, they're probably still in. But man, when Alabama loses, go look at every game. Vanderbilt, Florida State earlier this year. I think we can throw in this season as well. Ty Simpson is under pressure. They haven't figured out how to adjust to that yet. And that's a coaching thing. That's a Ty Simpson thing. That's got to work in tandem and just flat out be better. Because anytime a team gets pressure, it's disruptive to anybody, but Alabama seems to handle it a lot worse than some other teams do. So that's where the Crimson Tide have been. Every single loss looks the same. And a lot of their wins look the same. But all of their losses have those same things in common. Miscues, self-inflicted wounds, poor offensive line play, and sloppiness. That's what it keeps coming down to. So, man, that was an incredible football game, though. I don't want that to get lost. Alabama only had 2 penalties for 25 yards in this game. And yet they still made a bunch of mistakes all over the place. And so Kalen DeBoer has to win at Auburn. No, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. Let's keep it in the moment. Keep it in the present. Few fan bases are feeling as good as Oklahoma. A full formal apology to the Sooners will come on tomorrow's show. Fear not. And I will break down what comes next for Oklahoma. But because I want to process that a little bit more. But Alabama, bad vibes. Oklahoma, the highest of vibes for the Sooners, because, boy, that is a heck of a win. Sticking in the SEC. Was that the most hilarious game you've ever watched in College Station? First, this episode brought to you by DoorDash. The weekend is almost over. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. In that Oklahoma game, John Mateer, look, it wasn't pretty. It was not some gangbusters box score. He ran 10 times for 23 yards, was 15 of 23 for 138. But Oklahoma's defense, that delivered. 4 sacks. Eli Bowen with the pick 6. That's the play that really delivered it, because right when Alabama, there were so many times where it felt like the Crimson Tide were finally going to get on the right path and finally figure it out, and then Oklahoma's defense would step up. Time and again, Brent Venables had that unit playing exactly the way they needed to on the road. Defense travels. Oklahoma's run game did not. Doesn't shock me in the slightest. But that side of the ball can really get after it. So just like the Oklahoma defense delivered for Sooners fans, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Check out DoorDash today. Texas A&M. I've tried to wrap my head around a number of different takes for how to perceive this game. Does this mean Texas A&M is actually really good, or does it mean that they're not as good as we thought? I tend to lean towards the first one, but I can't ignore what I saw in the second half. So the most shocking score of the morning by far was South Carolina going to College Station at Kyle Field and just blowing out, dominating a Texas A&M team whose sloppiness made Alabama look like a buttoned-up organization today. So for Texas A&M to trail by 27 points at the half, you knew, oh my gosh, SEC teams are what when trailing by this many? Oh, and 286. They're done. Shocking upset. This would be the first ranked top 3 team to lose at home to an unranked team since Miami did it to Louisville a few weeks ago. More on the Cardinals later on this show. If you watched this game in the first half and thought and said to yourself, Texas A&M could still do it, it's possible. I don't know. I'll have what you're having is where I come down on that hypothetical thought, because nothing went well. It was so bad that Texas A&M was gifted a possession against South Carolina. Don't forget, the Gamecocks are having a dreadful season. 3-6 coming into today, and it's been ugly. And there was a lot of ugliness in this game. Texas A&M, goal to go off a turnover, and then all of a sudden they wound up with 0 points. You can drop a touchdown, miss a throw, and miss a field goal in the same sequence and win the game? South Carolina. Normally, I didn't think this would be possible for my fan mood assessment post-game scale. Worst of vibes for South Carolina. You had a chance to get yourself to bowl eligibility. You had a chance to give your fans something exciting, and you just collapsed historically. Historically. Last time I saw a collapse that big was Oregon in the Rose Bowl against TCU in 2015. They had a backup center who couldn't snap the ball. That's what happened. But here's the thing. That was at least, I'm not going to say a great excuse because you got to have a backup center who can snap the ball. But there was at least a reason there. There was no rhyme or reason to what happened in this second half. South Carolina just let Texas A&M do whatever they wanted. And despite their mistakes, it was the easiest looking 28. Texas A&M fumbled in the red zone again in the second half. They had 2 trips inside the 10, wind up with a combined 0 points, and they overcame a 27-point deficit. So my biggest takeaway with Texas A&M is that they have the ability to play with anyone, but they could play down to anyone. Because they are so, I talked about this with them going into this week, or maybe it was last week, everything blends together at this point. They're big play dependent. Everything about them is explosive. They create explosives on offense. They allow explosives. They are not great defending the run. Gamecocks only actually went for 121 on the ground in this game. Marcel Reed went for 439 yards on 22 completions. This was the easiest. Concepcion and Ashton Bethel-Roman had at least 135 yards each. Texas A&M made the easiest 28-0 run I have ever seen. They just marched up and down the field, turned around and got a stop. And Lenora Sellers, man, do you hear the word development get thrown out with quarterbacks a lot? You should. You should. His development as a passer is straight up awful. That's the biggest reason South Carolina lost this game. Is Lenore Sellers has so far to go. I'm talking further than Arch Manning at the beginning of the season. That's the way that it feels. So Texas A&M, I still believe is a great team. Indiana struggled with for a half with Wisconsin today. Then they figured it out. In Texas A&M, it looked a lot worse because it was a lot worse. Their floor isn't very high, but their ceiling is very high. And you know now, they're never out of a game. That was the easiest 28-point run I can remember seeing. So, Texas A&M, no vibes for the fan base. You got out. I know it was thrilling, but if you look at it from a football standpoint, you got to be able to realize, okay, there are some real problems that have to be worked out here. But Mike Elko's been extended, so he won't be the head coach somewhere else. At least there's that. Let's stay in the state of Texas and go to the Longhorns, who were beat soundly once the fourth quarter rolled around. This was a close competitive game, 14-10 going into the fourth. Now, I'm certain that the committee would not treat Texas any differently than they treated BYU, who lost on the road, and that game wasn't all that close, but it was semi-competitive-ish, kind of close, and then it came down to crunch time. And I'm certain they will punish Texas the same as they did in the Texas Tech game. Final score 34-10, where it was close throughout, and then the better team opened things up. This is a good win for Georgia. This is a good-looking resume win. Georgia is going to the SEC championship game. At least that's the way that it looks now that everybody's got a loss thrown in there. And the only undefeated teams in college football are in the Big Ten with Ohio State and Indiana. But they've got Charlotte and Georgia Tech. So no one's going to watch them play Charlotte this week. Why would you? I don't really know. That's why I'm really glad these late season SEC cupcakes are going away after this year. It's not good for the sport. Because Georgia just played this big-time game, and then next week, no one cares. And then they'll play Georgia Tech, and that could be a fun game. Because Georgia Tech escaped. Boston College was fighting, and Georgia Tech found a way. So their playoff hope is very much alive. But the Bulldogs beat Texas 35-10. So I could come on here and dunk on Arch Manning. That wouldn't be a very honest assessment of what happened to the Longhorns in this game. What did happen is Texas was shown to not be prepared. They should have been, but were not, to be a playoff team. Arch Manning took too long to get into a rhythm. I think he's in one now. And I think he played mostly good football. The interception was bad. Not going to argue with you on that. If you watch the game, you'd know that they did not have an Arch Manning problem above anything else. Texas ran as a team. Let's take out sack yardage. Texas ran for 40 yards. Not going to get it done. Texas had, 17 drops in this game? I don't know where the elite Texas receiving corps have gone, but that needs to be wildly retooled in the summer. And then you need to, put glue on Ryan Wingo's gloves or stop eating buttered popcorn before the games, because the drops are out of control for Texas. So he's not getting as much help as he should be. He still has things to work on, but at least I see him making progress, unlike Lenore Sellers, who's going 3 steps backwards, it feels, and not even taking that many steps forward, quite frankly. So for Texas in this spot at 7-3, they should not make the college football playoff. I don't care if they beat Texas A&M. You lost by 25 to the Georgia Bulldogs, who are a really good team. I'm not disputing that. But what other team in which conference would get that level of respect? I don't want to see it. But fundamentally, if you overlook that factor, which can happen, I never want to see a 3-loss team in the college football playoff. I'm sure it'll happen one day. And Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler were talking about the discussion. I think it's fair to have the discussion. I'm just saying, as a college football fan, I never want to see a 3-loss team in the playoff. I don't care what your schedule is. I don't care what your conference is. I really don't. I do not want you to be able to lose 3 games and still make the playoff. If you beat Texas A&M, let that be something that you carry into bowl season, into the off season, and into next year as, hey, we know how to do this. Or maybe you play spoiler for Texas A&M in some capacity. Sorry, I misspoke a moment ago. The Aggies didn't lose that game. It was just that wild. So if it's Georgia, Texas A&M in the SEC championship game, both those teams should go to the college football playoff. Unless Georgia loses to Georgia Tech. Those are different scenarios. I'll explore those another day. But Texas should be out. Texas should absolutely be out. Even if they beat Texas A&M, I would like them to get the same exact treatment that Ole Miss got a season ago. To which, as everyone was belly aching and Lane was tweeting and all that stuff, you know what it kept coming back to? Don't lose to Kentucky. And you know what it should come back to for Texas if they do beat Texas A&M in a couple weeks? It should come back to don't lose to Florida. The Gators stink. Yeah, they pushed Ole Miss for a little while today, probably because Lane Kiffin was thinking about what it's going to be like to coach for the team on the other sideline one day, which kind of seems like that's going to be the case. So that's just how it seems. That's all. I'm not reporting anything breaking there. So for Texas, I think there are a lot of positives to take away at the end of the season. Certainly, the vibes in Austin are bad today. Because he went on the road. Once again, Steve Sarkisian has not been able to beat the high-end teams since taking over as Texas's head coach. Is he starting to build a James Franklin narrative? You tell me. Probably too early to say that, but there's a little bit of a case. Because remember, Texas has been the beneficiary compared to Oklahoma of playing a comparatively weaker SEC schedule. What happens when that rotates back? We're going to find out. I think Sark is a good coach. I think that Sark's offense was pretty darn bad today against a Georgia defense that has not been great this year. They look more like Georgia, but that also comes back to the Texas offense not doing a lot of the little things right and not being good enough along the offensive line. I don't want to see Texas anywhere near the college football playoff, but I'm okay if Arch Manning comes back in 2026 because he's taken some real strides. So at least you've got that. But also, he was not the problem today. I'm nothing if not attempting to be fair. I'm going to be incredibly fair again. Am I the most fair commentator on Michigan? I don't know. I could be. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. So, something happened over the weekend, and just as I got over 500, the best bets cratered and went 1-5. Oh dear, it was not good. It was very not good across the board. Favorites, underdogs, didn't matter. San Diego State saved me from an 0-6 week. They beat Boise State 17-7 on the back of that great defense. That's the only one that I got right. So I got to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to get over 500. Maybe next week will be 6-0. But if you think I'm going on a cold streak here, which has been known to happen, then maybe you want to fade the picks at FanDuel. If you want to make your own, FanDuel's the place to do it. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Michigan 24, Northwestern 22. I thought Northwestern would keep it close. I wasn't sure about this close because, whoa, the Wolverines at Wrigley Field needed a game-winning field goal on a day where they had already missed two. Now, admittedly, one of them was from 60 yards. The guy looks like he's got plenty of leg for that. Bryce Underwood made more freshman-looking mistakes. But when the chips were down, backs were against the wall, it came down to it, and other generic lines like that, the Michigan defense and the Michigan run game showed up. I'm not surprised. Michigan's won 4 in a row. And whether you like it or not, whether you think they are a playoff team or not, I don't think they're a playoff caliber team. I just can't deny what their resume is. By the way, that Oklahoma loss got a bump today. That USC loss got a bump today. Those are the only ones who they haven't beaten this year. They've beaten everybody else. There is an element to Michigan's resume that is just being buoyed by win total. And I understand that. It's why they're not as high as some other teams. Northwestern is not bad, but Northwestern's not some great team either. David Braun almost had quite the victory to get his team bowl eligible today. So for Michigan, this is definitely on my 5-point post-game fan mood assessment scale. It's a no vibe sort of. Got in, okay, we won the game. It's a win, okay. Next week they go to Maryland. They should not have a problem in that game. Maryland is playing some pretty bad football right now. They couldn't score against Illinois' defense. Everybody scores on Illinois' defense. So that was one of my best bets that missed today. So that was cool. But anyway, Michigan controls their own fate to be a college football playoff team. And look, I do not believe that Michigan is a dangerous squad if they get into the playoff. I don't think they're a great team this year. I know they're a good one. They're on track to go the exact record I predicted them when the season started, which was 9-3. And guess what? They're probably not going to say it out loud because they have Ohio State at home. But if you have a bunch of wins that are not very impressive, which is what Michigan has, their best win is probably Nebraska or Washington. Probably Washington because in the manner in which they beat them, 24-7 at home. But Nebraska was on the road. So anyway, those are solid wins. They're not great. But if you are 10-2 and have a win over the number one team in the country that has been there since week 1 when they beat Texas, that's going to put you in the college football playoff. And I bet there are some folks that haven't paid super close attention to what Michigan has been over the last several weeks. And it's probably going, wait, Michigan? Bryce Underwood's still a freshman. Yeah, he is. Looks better and better each week and then makes some serious, hardcore freshman mistakes. No doubt about it. But if they beat Maryland, the Michigan-Ohio State game is going to have a playoff berth on the line for the Wolverines. Not for the Buckeyes, because they're going to be undefeated going into that game. But you're going to have the game, Ohio State-Michigan. And if Michigan wins, they go to the playoff, and it's at the Big House. I don't care which team you're a college football fan of. Start getting excited for that one right now, because that's some good stuff. I just hope they avoid the look-ahead spot. They survived. They found a way, and that's what everyone, including the committee, I think is going to remember with Michigan. So good for the Wolverines. It's a no-vibes outcome because, yikes, they easily could have lost and playoff hopes were out the door, and then you wouldn't have been able to even spoil Ohio State going to the playoff because we have a 12-team playoff, and that would have stunk. But, hey, go take care of Maryland, and you can play your way into the college football playoff, whether everybody else likes it or not. You talk about a 10-2 that could probably leapfrog BYU. Michigan might fall into that category because of the matchup with Ohio State. I wonder, on that note, it's just popped into my head as I'm recording, would Georgia Tech at 11-1 with a win over Georgia be ranked higher than BYU at 11-1 with its best win over Utah? Probably. They probably would. It'd be hard to, even though they struggled with Wake Forest, even though they struggled with Boston College, who's probably the worst Power 4 team in all of college football. If they go win against Georgia, that'd be hard to ignore. So, boy, a lot of different scenarios in the final few weeks that are not going to involve Louisville and Cincinnati. Duke can go in here as well. I whiffed on that one. I thought Vegas knew something. Vegas didn't know diddly squat by favoring Duke. They lost that game 31-17. They trailed 31-3 in the fourth quarter. It wasn't close. The Duke defense is not good enough. The Duke offense is inconsistent. And Duke is now a 5-loss team. That's crazy. They're way too talented. They gave Darian Mensah way too much money to have that be the outcome, but at least they're going for it. I respect them for that. But Louisville and Cincinnati blew it this weekend. Teams that I'll talk about the G5 playoff race on Monday or Tuesday's show because South Florida threw a wrench into things by losing at Navy. Oopsie daisies. Louisville and Cincinnati were these under-the-radar teams that had chances to go to the playoff. Louisville needed some help, but they could have made the ACC championship game, and they couldn't kick the ball. That's all it came down to. Am I a little peeved because this was one of my best bets that I added late? They were at home and couldn't beat Clemson at home. Now, this is, of course, the worst of vibes for Louisville fans. 2 straight home losses for Jeff Brom's team. And maybe this is the last season he coaches with Louisville. We'll see how the coaching carousel shakes out and who everybody wants to hire. You had your own playoff and ACC championship destiny, maybe not in that order, in your hands after the win against Miami. And then you had 2 home games in which you were a favorite because you're the better team, and you went out and lost. That's a bad time to be a Louisville fan, and that time, unfortunately, is right now. And then another team I talked about, who I also had as one of my best bets, and Cincinnati. Get this. Cincinnati had not lost as a ranked team to an unranked opponent since 2011. And Arizona walked into their house and shut down that offense to the tune of 24 points, and Arizona wins 30-24. Highest of vibes for Arizona. Brent Brennan might wind up with 9 wins at the end of the season. That's entirely possible. Did it feel that way before the season after last year? Nope. It really didn't. And yet, here we are. So Arizona is climbing, and they're going to have a big offseason. Final couple games, maybe the Wildcats wind up with 10 wins. I don't know. I doubt that. But they're winning at least 8, maybe 9 or 10 games once bowl season comes to a close. And then you go into a big offseason. Because remember, this is the Big 12. This is a conference where you can go up and down a lot easier than in some of the other leagues. Because I think the ACC and the Big 12, you have this. I think you're seeing this in the SEC, frankly. I mean, Vanderbilt is a team that might be controlling its own fate to go to the college football playoff. Vanderbilt. Who can't? If Vanderbilt can do it, who can't? I mean, even Indiana in the Big Ten. That's just the era of college football that we're in. So I think it does apply to some extent to any conference, but in the Big 12, you've got Texas Tech, but then there's a gap. Like we saw last week when BYU went and played, there's a gap right now. I don't know if it'll last forever. I'm just saying there's a gap. So it's Texas Tech and then a bunch of teams that you can definitely go beat. There's a heck of a win for Arizona. But Cincinnati controlled their own fate to make the Big 12 championship game and therefore the playoff. One thing to note, and I will end on this. Did you know that Arizona State and Houston are both alive for the Big 12 championship game? Okay, that's it. I'm done. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.